What is up, dear viewer? Welcome to part 3, also known as the third part of this review of Digimon Adventure 02. I guess we'll continue with number 19, the downfall of the Digimon Kaiser. We've reached the climax of the Digimon Kaiser arc. The Kaiser is collecting parts of Digimon to build his own monster, Chimeramon. He drives this big cashew nut base to this whirlpool to claim his next victim, Devimon. But why is Devimon here in this whirlpool? After Angemon killed him in Season 1, he would have been reborn in the Village of Beginnings. I get that. And then when Ryo killed him a second time in the Anode and Cathode Tamer video games, the same thing would have happened. But why is Devimon here now? I mean, I like the idea that there's a dark Digimon in the depths of the ocean, but Devimon has no business being underwater. Why not use, I don't know, Marine Devimon? Or maybe they could have done something with Dagomon here. No, it's Devimon because the writers wanted to do their thing with TK. They wanted to show how his hatred for Devimon still lingers from when Angemon sacrificed himself back in Season 1. It's just too bad that it doesn't make any sense for Devimon to be here. Why is Mechanorimon vacuuming up Devimon? The Kaiser didn't need to do that in order to claim any other Digimon data. All he had to do to get Kabuterimon's data was to observe it. He didn't physically capture any other Digimon to get their parts. And how come Devimon didn't even put up a fight? He was the big bad for the first quarter of Season 1. He's a strong boy. Wait, is that how Dark Towers are made? They simply materialize when the Kaiser's cashew base flies by? How come there was only one in each of the areas visited before? Why not plant whole fields of them like we see here? And how did he make the one in the Roachmon episode? That one was underground, or at least I think it was. As the kids infiltrate the Kaiser's base, we get a confrontation between TK and Ken. Ooh, look at how he just grabs that whip. As cool as this is, it's hard for me not to take a step back and look at this scene in the grand scheme of things. It turns out that the writers put Devimon in the whirlpool just to establish that TK really hates the powers of darkness. That's his main motivation for attacking the Kaiser here. And even though it seems TK really gets the Kaiser to doubt himself here, this isn't part of what defeats him in the end. And this fight is never referenced again in the whole series, even though Ken and TK develop a friendship later on. You'd think they would at least, mention it or something. So let me say this. This scene is great in isolation, but the build-up for TK's hate of darkness could have been introduced and established much earlier, and we should have seen more concrete consequences of this battle later on in the series. As it is now, you could cut it out, and it doesn't really affect the story too much. Davis gets a nice character moment here, when he decides that he can't just retreat anymore. He takes matters into his own hands, and for once he has actually fought through the situation. They might never get a chance like this again. The time for action is now. I really like the moment between Davis and Wormmon here, where Wormmon betrays the Kaiser in order to save him. And then Davis decides to trust Wormmon. Wormmon leads Davis to the Golden Digimental, the Digimental of Miracles. Why does a Digimental of Miracles even exist? What kind of crest is Miracles? All of the other ones are either emotions or virtues, something to strive for and excel at. How do you excel at miracles? Is it having luck? And why does the crest of kindness appear here? That's the Kaiser's crest. And it's not at all related to the Digimental of Miracles. That one even has its own little symbol. And to be clear, there is a Digimental of Kindness, but it never appears in the show. My point is that it's a completely separate Digimental than this Miracles one.
Wait, so there are more crests than just the 8 from Season 1?
If Ken has a crest, shouldn't Ryo from the video games also have one? Ryo was the one who introduced Ken to Digimon, but more on that later. But hey, Ken became a chosen child because he watched the Diablomon fight on the internet, the one featured in our wargame. His circumstances for becoming chosen were the same as Yoli's, so if he got a crest, shouldn't she get one too? Why does Ken get special treatment?
When did Ken get his crest? And more importantly, why did the writers make it a crest if he's never going to use it?
With the Digimental of Miracles, Veemon evolves into the super powerful Magnamon. Also, Wormmon sacrifices himself to make Magnamon even stronger. Bada bing bada boom, Magnamon obliterates Chimeramon. With no partner monster left, the Kaiser is defeated. In addition, he recognizes our hero's baby Digimon from the real world, which makes him realize that Digimon are real living creatures. This allows him to break free from the evil within him and come around to the light side. I really like how it connects to the earlier episode at the soccer game. It creates the sense that each episode doesn't just exist in isolation. Later we find out that Ken wasn't pure evil. He was infected with a dark seed, which apparently have the ability to turn people into one-dimensional villains. Besides, he was under the impression that the digital world was nothing more than a video game, causing him to not care about his actions too much. The fact that he didn't have all the correct information makes it easier to accept his redemption later, as this was basically all just a big misunderstanding. However, that doesn't stop him from blaming himself. Number 20. A 5-minute rant about how this could have been done better. So, that was the Digimon Kaiser arc. Here's my idea for how you could restructure this arc in a way that would make it just a bit more interesting. By the time Chimeramon shows up, Wormmon has had enough of the Kaiser's shenanigans. Up until now in the series, Wormmon has just been hanging around the Kaiser like a little bitch. If he doesn't contribute anything, I have a hard time understanding why the Kaiser hasn't just gotten rid of him yet. I mean, I like the dynamic between the Kaiser and Wormmon. It's interesting to see an abusive relationship between a kid and his bug. I would, however, like to have seen it being pushed even further. I think the Kaiser should have dark evolved Wormmon into some really strong beast. A parasite monster or something like that. You know, like how Tai got SkullGreymon. That wasn't just a cool horrific monster. That was a warning for Tai that he was doing something seriously wrong. The same thing is used in Digimon Tamers and Digimon Savers. That would be perfect for the Kaiser. Imagine if in the first few episodes we heard stories of how a terribly powerful insect monster ravages areas of the digital world, but we only see the destruction it has left behind. A while later we finally see the creature and it's just this monstrous nightmare. The good guys realize just how weak they really are and face a real crisis. Meanwhile, we see the monster insect turn back into Wormmon, who regrets his actions and pleads with the Kaiser to not evolve him back into that monster and have him do those horrible things again. The Kaiser resents him for his weakness and whips him a few times. Some episodes later, the good guys actually manage to beat the monster bug, and hey, maybe it was unusually weak this time because the Kaiser had been using his whip once too many. At this point, the Kaiser would search for a new monster worthy of being his partner, and he would start collecting our heroes' monsters by turning them evil, just like BlackWarGreymon. Also, soon after Chimeramon is defeated in the show, they will be introducing the concept of fusing two good guy Digimons together in order to create a stronger one. This process has been known as Jogress, DNA Digivolution, and a bunch of other names, but I'll just keep it simple and refer to it as fusion. Anyways, here's an idea. Why not introduce the concept of fusion right here instead, with Chimeramon? Let's say this Chimeramon mini-arc were to take place soon after the Kaiser had enslaved Tai's BlackWarGreymon, but rather than Lightermon just saving the day, the Kaiser would also capture Matt's Garurumon and Izzy's Kabuterimon, along with other monsters, and simply fuse those components into Chimeramon. Now we would know that this monstrosity is made up from good guys too, which would make the stakes even higher. You don't want to risk destroying your friends. Maybe Chimeramon could start out without wings, for example. But then he absorbs Birdramon, Angemon or Angewomon, which would make him an even bigger threat. Maybe instead of Magnamon defeating Chimeramon, there is no Magnamon. Let's say Wormmon would sacrifice himself to allow the kids to escape, but then he gets absorbed by Chimeramon too, and losing his real partner could be what makes the Kaiser realize that Digimon are living beings. The Kaiser would order Chimeramon to stop, only to realize that he has lost control. Chimeramon moves on to terrorize the digital world another day, and the Kaiser is powerless to stop him. After this, the kids can reach adult level while planning on how to defeat Chimeramon. Meanwhile, Chimeramon bumps into more partner monsters and absorbs them after quickly defeating them. He grows stronger and stronger. Soon enough, Davies, Yoli and Cody would be the only ones to have their partners under control, which would force our new Season 2 main characters to save the day. This would eventually give them the idea that the good guys could fuse too, and then you could have Paildramon be the one to defeat Chimeramon. It would be fusion versus fusion. How poetic. There, that would be at least 8 times more interesting than just destroying Dark Towers for 20 episodes. But of course, none of that happens. Oh well. I still find it weird that a monster that is literally made up of parts of other Digimon is not a result of such a fusion. It's also disappointing to see that Chimeramon is a chimera only in design. He doesn't even use any powers of his components, he just has his own original attack where he vomits acid on people. Remember how Apocalypse could use all kinds of techniques that other monsters used? Look, there's Vandamon's bloody stream! And there's Machineramon's Mugen cannon. Why can't Chimeramon do something like that? That would make him more of a threat and a more interesting villain. In the end, what was the point of him being a mishmash of other monsters? Number 21. Ken's backstory. From here I'll skip ahead to episode 23, which is by far the best episode of season 2. This is the sort of thing I've been longing for this whole season. It's just a character study of Ken. There isn't even a Digimon appearing in the first half of the episode. We just focus on Ken and his character. His backstory makes us understand what made him who he is today. Suddenly he's not just a blank slate character like Yoli, where the writers can stick any trait on her just because the script requires it. We completely understand Ken after watching this one episode, and I wish we'd have something similar for the other characters too. It wouldn't necessarily have to be as sad, of course, but something on the same level of depth, I mean. So, one day when Ken was still a little kid, a Digivice popped out of his and his brother Osamu's computer screen. Osamu claimed it as his own and told Ken not to touch it, but Ken's curiosity got the better of him, and soon enough he was sucked into the digital world. In the show, we don't get too much information about Ken's first adventure there. However, we see that together with another boy and Wormmon, he defeated Millenniummon. This resulted in Ken getting infected with the Dark Seed. When Ken returned home, he was caught by his brother. Osamu wasn't too happy about Ken going through his stuff. At this point in time, Osamu was the genius of the family. Everyone loves Osamu. Feeling neglected, jealous and angry, Ken wished that his brother would just die. And one day he did. Ken was full of guilt and regret, and once more turned to his computer screen. Compelled by a mysterious email, he went into the dark world and turned his Digivice into the black D3 Digivice he would still have years later. This place fuels his dark seed and gives birth to his Kaiser persona. We later find out that the Kaiser's appearance was modeled on Ken's subconscious wishes. The resemblance to Osamu is striking, what with the hair and the glasses. Ken wanted to be like his brother. At the cost of his morality, the seed turned him into a genius and made that into reality. And that's it. But hey, how come Ken went to the dark world the second time he entered the computer? The computer is for going to the digital world. In order to go to the dark world, you have to be zapped away at a crosswalk or walk through a portal or whatever. This isn't very consistent. Number 22. Game incompatibility / video game tangent. Yes, motherfucker, I'm talking about the Ryu games. Since these games explore Ken's past and were made as official tie-ins to the show and are considered canon, I thought I would quickly go over them to see how well they connect to the show. First up, there's Anode and Cathode Tamer, which I mentioned briefly before. The story starts on New Year's Eve 1999. in other words a few months after Season 1. Tai and the others have been kidnapped by an evil Digimon known as Millenniummon. Millenniummon is a fusion between Chimeramon and the resurrected Machinedramon. Wait, how can Chimeramon exist in 1999 if the Digimon Kaiser didn't create him until 2002? Shit, that doesn't make any sense. To make matters worse, Millenniummon was the one who sent the dark seeds into Ken, which is what made Ken evil and in turn inspired him to create Chimeramon, who then evolved into Millenniummon to send the dark seed into Ken. Ugh, what a mess. No matter how you slice it, this doesn't work. Anyways, a boy named Ryo is recruited to team up with Tai's Agumon to save the kids and defeat Millenniummon. The next game, Tag Tamers, is actually about Ken's first trip into the digital world. Wow, right? However, I should mention that the circumstances of this adventure don't overlap 100% with what we saw in the show. The game opens during the movie Our War Game. Ryo is watching the Diablomon fight on the internet over at Ken's house. Even though Ryo is seen in the mountains during the battle in the movie, I guess Ken lives close to a mountainside? Maybe? Anyways, just like Yoli, witnessing the fight is what makes Ken eligible to become a chosen child. In episode 33, Ken starts to say that he first saw a Digimon in August of 2000, but that he can't remember the details. However, the Diablomon fight took place in March during spring break, not August, so I guess he's misremembering. The very next day, Ryo visits again, but this time Vmon pops out of the screen and tells them that Millenniummon is back. Now he's Moon Millenniummon. Vmon then brings the two of them to the digital world. I assume that it was earlier this same day that the Digivice popped out of Ken's computer and Osamu put it in his desk drawer. Some minor inconsistencies arise here, as episode 23 shows Ken going to the digital world alone his first time, but that's not how it happens in the game. Ryo and Vmon are with him. So how could Ken have a whole adventure in the digital world without his parents knowing he was gone? Well, in Season 1, time moved slower in the digital world than in the real world. Several months passed in the digital world, but only one day went by in the real one. In episode 27 of Season 2, Izzy points out that Apocalymon's distortions didn't end until after the kids gave up their crests to the four holy beasts. This would mean that the time dilations didn't stop until then either, meaning that Ken could have spent months in the digital world during his first visit and still be home by supper. Soon after the boys arrive in the digital world, Ken is sent to some sort of mirror world. This is where he meets Wormmon. After a bunch of adventures, Ken and Ryo defeat Moon Millenniummon. But with his last efforts, he tries to infect Ryo with a dark seed. However, Ken takes a bullet for Ryo, and the rest is history. This scene is mostly the same as in the TV show, only that it takes place in the village of beginnings in the game, rather than in a desert. I do like that Ryo gets a little cameo in the show, but of course I would have liked to have seen more. You might have noticed that Tai is present in the game, and, well, yes, Ken and Tai meet. Yet they never mention this meeting during Season 2. The same is true for the Vmon I mentioned. This is indeed the same Vmon who'll become Davis's partner later. In the third game, D1 Tamers, Ryo even starts out with both Vmon and Wormmon in his party at the same time. In retrospect, it feels really odd that there isn't a scene between Vmon and Wormmon in the show where they're saying something like, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't fight, remember when we defeated Moon Millenniummon together?" In D1 Tamers, Ken has fallen ill from the Dark Seed. He's stuck in bed in the real world, while Ryo enters a battle tournament to prepare for another fight with Millenniummon, who has returned again. However, Millenniummon sends Ryo back in time, leaving Ken all alone. The fourth and final game in the series, Brave Tamer, picks up where the last one left off. Ken isn't a part of the story and the game isn't relevant to this review at all. It's more about how Ryo exits the adventure universe and enters the Tamers universe. Yes, if anyone wondered, these two characters are one and the same. The final thing I'll say about these games is that at the end of Tag Tamers, Ken must have returned home where Osamu would catch him. Sometime later, Ken would have gone to the Dark World, where the darkness within him would have turned his Digivice into the Black D3, which would have been the first one in existence. However, both Ryu and Ken were said to already have D3s in their possession during Tag Tamers, which of course would be impossible if Ken's later Black D3 was truly the first one. In the end, there isn't too much overlap between the show and the games concerning Ken's backstory, and yet, pretty much all information we get in the games seems to contradict the show.
Number 23. Subjective creature complaints. So, before Digimon became a TV show, there were 2 manga series, Command Digimon and Digimon Adventure V-Tamer 01. This second one, V-Tamer 01, featured an alternate version of Tai, who had the adult level V-Dramon as his Digimon partner. When the time came to design partners for the second season of the anime, Vmon was designed as a child version of V-Dramon. Okay, so then it would make sense that Vmon evolves into V-Dramon, right? Well, no actually. Instead, they decided to design a new adult stage for Vmon called X-Vmon. But why though? If it ain't broken, don't fix it. V-Dramon looks more like a beast, like what an evolution tends to look like. And wouldn't it be a nice piece of cross-promotion if a character from the manga turned up in the show? Maybe I'm just bitter because I prefer V-Dramon over X-Vmon. But then again, I think all of the adult level partners in Season 2 have the same problem. They just look like bigger versions of the child forms. X-Vmon just looks like a grown-up Vmon with wings and a knife through his head. Aquilamon is just Hawkmon with horns. Ankylomon is just a spiky Armadillomon. Stingmon is just Wormmon standing up. How about Wormmon turn into, I don't know, Janmamon or Snymon? I mean, Snymon has been an established villain since the first episode. At this point in the series, there's this mini arc going on with the characters doubting if Ken really is a good guy now and if they can trust him. If you still want them to doubt Ken after his defeat, then this is a good way of reinforcing those suspicions. Can we really trust someone with a Snymon as a partner? But no, instead he evolves into a Bugman. So why aren't these adult forms more creative? Part of the fun with Digimon is that evolution is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. This is a world where it makes sense that a lump of slime turns into a teddy bear, a vegetable turns into an alien invader, Mushroom Boy into Tree Stump, and a piece of shit turns into another piece of shit. Maybe it's just me, but I really like it for some reason. It's creative and surprising.
The Season 2 evolutions are more like something you would see in Pokemon.
Pokemon tends to be a lot more predictable in its evolutions. Sometimes a bit too predictable.
Evolution is more like a life cycle for Pokemon.
Like aging, and therefore the changes usually aren't as drastic as with Digimon. However, Digimon are digital creatures. Their data is reorganized and rewritten when they evolve. It sort of makes sense that they completely change shape during evolution.
With that in mind,
compare these 02 evolutions to those from Season 1.
Notice how all of them change completely. Now go back to Season 2. I'm not impressed.
Number 24. Digivolve into Champion. With the Kaiser out of the way, the kids are cleaning up the remaining Dark Towers. Once again, Davis gets jealous of the bond between TK and Kari. However, rather than simply working on himself and talk to her, Davis thinks that making Vmon digivolve naturally into his adult form will win Kari over. This is silly. Why does Davis think that this will work? Adult level, really? Just last episode he evolved Vmon into Magnamon, a legendary once-in-a-lifetime evolution with powers equivalent to that of a Mega level. Isn't that more impressive than a regular old adult? There's also the fact that Davis was a key player in defeating the Kaiser, all because he himself decided that he had to stay and fight. My point is that he has done a lot of heroic stuff recently. If that wasn't enough for Kari to fall for him, I don't think it's going to happen. Persistence is one thing, but there's value in knowing when enough is enough. I find it odd that the characters suddenly think that their adult forms are unlockable just because the Kaiser has been defeated. Why now? I mean, as soon as you knock down the towers in any given area before, you should have had the same probability to trigger an evolution as you have now. The requirements to unlocking the adult level in Season 1 was food and the human partner being in danger. Well, they've had lots of food all throughout the season, and the kids have most definitely been in danger before. Davis decides to put that very same strategy to use and places himself and Veemon in a number of dangerous situations to prompt the evolution. But how did he find out that that would work? Nobody has told him how things worked in Season 1. But why wouldn't this simply make Veemon evolve into Flamedramon or Lightramon if all he tries to do is save Davis? I mean, those forms are already unlocked and should be the easiest ones accessed by Veemon. Maybe all he has to do is to not say Digimental up. I would assume that the real reason for the shift to adults is that the people behind the scenes were desperate to show new ways that the Digimon could evolve. Beginning with Season 2, regular old evolution wasn't deemed exciting enough, so they introduced armor evolution. As soon as they were done with that, they wanted to jump onto their next idea, fusion. These adult forms only exist as a bridge between the child level and fusion. This is evident by the fact that this adult evolution happens in the very next episode after the final Digimental was activated. First there's Magnamon, then Expositionmon, then a 1 episode break with Ken, then Ankylomon, Aquilamon, and as soon as everyone has reached the adult level, it's fusion time directly after that. That's intense! I guess we should talk about the threat in this episode. Davis and Veemon accidentally see a Tortomon peeing. Yes, this is the level that we have stooped to. I mean, imagine you were the writer and your boss said, okay, you're doing the episode where Veemon evolves into an adult. It has to take place after the Kaiser is defeated, but otherwise you have free hands. Why would you ever do an episode about a peeing Tortomon? I just don't understand it. It's such a weird color of pee too. I guess he drinks a lot of water. Davis and his partner have seen something they shouldn't, causing Tortomon to chase the two of them all over the place. As they reach a cliff, Davis has a plan. He tries to have Tortomon go wash his hands before killing them. It's nice to see Davis doing something cunning for once, but it doesn't work. Tortomon gets angrier and the script decides that this is the time for Veemon to evolve. As Tortomon is defeated, he has another piss. However, this time he actually washes his hands afterwards. Davis says the Tortomon is reasonable if you talk to him. What? No, he just tried to kill you. He only decided to obey you once you defeated him. How come he had to pee twice in the span of 5 minutes? Tortomon must have a minuscule bladder. Piss and poop jokes do happen a few times in both Season 1 and 2. I wish they wouldn't though, since this is always at the expense of the tone. It's hard to take the threat of Tortomon seriously when the conflict is all about seeing him go to the bathroom. The next time the kids go into the digital world, this lady, known as Arachnemon, uses her hair to turn a Dark Tower into Thunderballmon, which attacks Cody. So worth pointing out is that earlier in the episode, the Digimon were unable to evolve due to the Dark Towers. But barely a minute into the fight with Thunderballmon, Armadillomon evolves into Ankylomon. How? Thunderballmon is the same Dark Tower that cancelled evolutions just a few minutes ago. He should still have the properties of the tower. His presence alone should stop Armadillomon from evolving. Then Ken comes along and steals Ankylomon's thunder. Armadillomon's evolution is not built up well at all, and it gets undermined by Stingmon really quick. Think about this, Ankylomon doesn't even get to save the day in the episode where he first appears. There isn't much focus on Cody specifically in this episode, but there is this scene with his grandfather, which I really like.
ゼリーといえばプルンとスプーンですくって食べるもんじゃと思っておったが、こうやって飲むことができるとはの。これを初めて飲んだ時は、わしもまだまだじゃと思った。お前もそうは思わんか?
Next up we see Mimi in the digital world. She's in trouble and apparently yells so loud that the kids can hear it from the computer room in the real world. How the fuck does that work? I don't like that. Then there's a fight with Golemon, which causes Hawkmon to evolve. The circumstances triggering this evolution seem so arbitrary. Remember how it was established that adult evolutions happen when the human is in danger? Well, never mind that, because Yoli unlocks Aquilamon by realizing that Ken isn't such a bad guy anymore. Fuck. Number 25. Ken's Redemption. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, Zuko was the antagonist for the first 2 seasons. However, by the 3rd season, he turns into a good guy. After hating him for the majority of the series, it understandably takes a while for the heroes to accept him. So, in the last season, the heroes are given 1 episode each, which focuses on Zuko establishing trust for them. Each character has his or her own reason for not trusting Zuko, and their conflicts are solved based on their personalities and history with each other.
In order to gain Aang's trust, Zuko offers to train Aang in firebending.
Zuko helps Sokka infiltrate a prison to rescue his father. And finally, Zuko gains Katara's friendship by tracking down the man who killed her mother. By the end of it, it is totally believable that these characters are all friends. So, how does Digimon Adventure 02 deal with this same topic when Ken turns good? Well, Davis accepts his turning good immediately. And as we just saw, it doesn't take too much for Jolie either. There isn't really too much about what TK and Kari think about him. They just seem to have come to terms with him off screen. The only one who really struggles with Ken is Cody, which is in character for him. Okay, so I can buy that Davis would accept Ken very easily, and I like the Cody approach. But that means that only 2 out of 5 characters have a change of heart that makes sense, which isn't a very good score. At any rate, Davis believes that Ken can redeem himself. Davis has been ready to forgive Ken ever since they first defeated him. This causes their Digimon to fuse. The problem with this is that fusion evolution should be the result of 2 people's connection being at its peak. This should be the equivalent of the character development needed for perfect evolutions. But Davis and Ken's friendship has just started here. This isn't the place to introduce fusion. Later on, there's this scene where the characters tease us with the idea that Expositionmon and the others could potentially fuse into any combinations. This, of course, never happens. We only get Paildramon, Sylphimon, and Shakumon. Why? Isn't new monsters what this is all about? Why are these characters saying this kind of stuff if you're not going to do anything with it? Fusions in different combinations would allow for more character development between the different characters. You know how I said that character development is what triggered perfect evolutions in Season 1? Well, the same should be true in Season 2. For the fusions, you should have the 2 participants' bond grow stronger than it ever has been before. And it would be nice if these relationships end up at the opposite end of where they started. What I mean by this is that you want real development in the character dynamic. So maybe Davis and Ken weren't the optimal fusion pair. Let's toy with the idea of other combinations and see if we can do something more interesting. I know I've rambled on about Davis and TK's relationship before, but the 2 of them being fusion partners could be another way to develop their relationship. So much more could have been done with the rivalry between these 2, and fusion would be a great way to end that arc. I know I keep suggesting different things that could have made their conflict more interesting, but that's just because the show itself did nothing. Maybe Davis and Kari could have had a falling out because she doesn't reciprocate his feelings. The conflict could be solved with some genuine character development, which could allow the 2 of them to become a fusion couple. In the same vein, Cody and Ken should have been paired up. They have a true conflict since Cody can't bring himself to forgive Ken. It's a conflict that's actually linked with his character. But imagine if him forgiving Ken would result in their partners fusing into some dino bug instead of nothing. Another pair that would have worked well is Ken and Kari. They have the Dark World in common and could bond over dealing with that. That's not much of a conflict being solved, but whatever. I wonder how Cody would have reacted if Kari or Jolie were his fusion partner. I don't think he's had a single one-on-one conversation with Kari, and even though he was introduced as knowing Jolie from before in the first episode, they've never seemed to be closer to each other than any of the others. When it comes to Jolie, the only other chosen child I can see become her fusion partner is Izzy, or maybe Mimi if they actually develop that friendship. Of course, both of them are from Season 1, and I don't think it ever occurred to the writers that a Season 2 character could fuse with a non-Season 2 character. I don't quite know what could have been done with Jolie when it comes to fusions, but that's simply because her character is so inconsistent. We have nothing to work with, because we never know which version of Jolie we're going to get. I'm asking myself, what conflict should Jolie overcome? And I can't think of any of her flaws. I still don't know her character. Speaking of characters without substance, this Ukuamon that Davis and Ken are fighting is such a nothing enemy. Why did the writers choose Ukuamon? How about they pull out a creature that would make this super hard for Ken? A monster that would really remind him and the others of what an awful human he has been. Like Airdramon, for example, one of his signature monsters. What if Arachnamon created an Airdramon and evolved it into its perfect form? Fight Megadramon? Or what if she created a Dark Tower version of that monster insect creature I made up earlier? Yeah, that guy. Don't you think that this would add more like drama to the fight than just ooh, grey bug? Number 26. Level confusion. So how exactly do the levels work here? Armor is roughly on par with the adult level, even though Gatomon is already adult, so Nefertumon would be even stronger, but whatever. Let's talk about fusion evolution. Hawkmon says that Pyldramon fights Ukuamon on even terms. Does that mean that Pyldramon only is as strong as a regular perfect level? But he's made up of 2 adults. Shouldn't he be even stronger than the sum of his parts? Expositionmon plus Stingmon plus any extra energy the evolution could grant them. You know, rather than having the strength of just one perfect monster. Listen, later Angemon and Ankylomon will fuse to form Shakumon. Would Shakumon really only be as strong as Angemon's normal perfect form, Holy Angemon? If that's the case, then why not use both Holy Angemon and Ankylomon? Rather than having one perfect, why not have one perfect and one adult? 2 attackers would be better than one. Let's take another example. In our wargame, the 2 megas, BlackWarGreymon and Metalgarurumon, fuse to form Omegamon, who is also classified as a mega for some reason. The rules we're playing by would mean that they got weaker by combining their forces. Rather than 2 megas, they now only have 1. But wait, Izzy later states that Omegamon has more than 10 times the power of BlackWarGreymon and Metalgarurumon. How the hell does that work? Wouldn't that mean that Pyldramon would have at least, I don't know, 5 times Expositionmon and Stingmon's power? Thus, Pyldramon would be stronger than a normal perfect level like Ukuamon? No matter how you look at it, some aspect of this doesn't make any sense.
Later on, Pyldramon manages to evolve into the mega-level Imperial Dramon. I find it super strange that a fusion monster like Pyldramon can evolve further. Let me attempt an explanation. We've seen Omegamon be formed by Tai and Matt's partner monsters at a variety of levels. BlackWarGreymon and Metalgarurumon are Mega. Agumon and Gabumon are at the child level. And finally, Greymon and Garurumon are adults. You'll notice that no matter what the level the 2 component Digimons are at, they always fuse into the same monster, Omegamon. Compare this to the adult levels Expositionmon and Stingmon, who can fuse into the perfect level Pyldramon, which can then further evolve into Mega. By this logic, shouldn't Greymon and Garurumon's fusion only be at the perfect level? And shouldn't this perfect Omegamon then be able to evolve once more into Mega? It seems like the best solution would be if fusion were its own level above Mega, as it represents the full potential of at least 2 monsters combined. I mean, I always assumed that the Omegamon made up of lower level Digimon was as strong as the Mega combination. But in this case, Paildramon shouldn't be able to evolve any further. At this point, I'd really appreciate an explanation for how the power levels work, especially the fusions. There was an exposition episode about fusions, yet they failed to mention how their strength relates to the other levels. My brain hurts. Hey, speaking of Omegamon, why don't Tai and Matt ever fuse their monsters and join the fight in this season? I get that they can't evolve into Perfect right now, but if these two adults can fuse into Paildramon, why wouldn't Greymon and Garurumon be able to form Omegamon too? Maybe it would be a somewhat weaker Omegamon, but still, why aren't you two helping? Izzy then delivers some exposition and finally tells us why the Season 1 kids haven't been evolving to the perfect level this whole season. He starts by admitting that he maybe should have told the new kids about this earlier. Yeah, no shit. We've gone half a season without knowing why the writers have nerfed all of the Season 1 monsters down to adult level. Kari says they didn't say anything because she thinks it's sad. Really? The only sad thing here is that the writers thought that this was an acceptable excuse. Apparently, Genai called the kids back to the digital world soon after the Diablomon fight. So, how did he open a gate from the digital world? At the end of Season 1, he was very clear about that not being a possibility. Well, we never find out. In order to fix Apocalymon's temporal distortion for real, the kids have to give up the power of their crests. Of course, that doesn't fully explain anything. Apocalypse already destroyed the crest's physical form at the end of Season 1, and yet the monsters were still able to reach perfect and beyond by using only the power within their hearts. So, is that the power that was given up? The phrase power of the crests is used for both what they gave up and what they still have left. I'm so confused. Either you can evolve to perfect or you can't. Also, remember how Ken made Greymon evolve into the perfect level? How did he do that if Greymon lost that power? When Gatomon and Angemon do that in Season 2, they both need an extra boost to make it happen. Ken just used his T3. I guess it pays to be the bad guy. Number 27. More things that bug me. Arachnomon lures the kids into this giant house. It turns out that she can mind control insects with this flute. You'd think this flute would come in handy in the future, but she never uses it again. Hey, maybe she could have used it before, when the kids were still trying to figure out if Ken really was on their side. She could have made Stingmon turn against them when they were still super skeptical about Ken. That would have been an interesting conflict. But nope, the mind control flute is only for the big bug house. The kids decide that they won't kill any Digimon since these are living creatures rather than transformed Dark Towers. Yet Expositionmon crushes a Roachmon as he's escaping. Do you really think he survived that? Ugh. Around this time, we'll find out that Arachnomon isn't really a lady. She's a spider Digimon. This leads me to ask why she can control bugs. I mean, she's a spider. It's Arachnemon. Arachnoids aren't insects. You know that, right? Since Stingmon and Digimon are bugs, they are hypnotized too and turn against the good guys. But why wasn't Stingmon affected before? I don't know, maybe Arachnomon played the wrong song before. At this point, Yoli tells us that she knows how to use audio editing programs on the computer. Apparently her sister is into drama and Yoli sometimes helps out with the sound effects. This is what saves everyone, but you can't just drop that in here. You have to set it up first. Now her audio skills just come out of nowhere. It feels like a Deus Ex Machina. How about you mention it a few episodes earlier? Or how about we see her working on some sound effects in her downtime? You know, Matt is a singer in a band. What if you had her helping him out? Since Matt is TK's brother, this could even allow for a scene between only TK and Yoli, which would tell us something about their relationship. But that doesn't happen. Let's instead talk about the episode in which Yoli and Kari's Digimon fuse. The two of them are separated into the dark world, and for some reason Ken is here too.
How does this Dark World dimension work? Is it like an onion skin on top of the digital world? Then how come that's not at all how it worked back in the Digimon episode? Why can Davis hear Yoli when she yells here, but not now when she's right next to him? I guess he can only hear when the script needs him to. It seems that every time an episode tries to show how different two characters are, one of the characters has to mutate into someone completely different.
The reason for this seems to be that the foundations for these new characters are so weak that everything that's built on top gets even weaker.
This time, Yoli is confrontational, accidentally rude, neurotic, and also willfully ignorant of problems. Yoli has never acted like this before. She only does it now so that there will be a conflict between her and Kari.
One that they can neatly fix in order for their Digimon to fuse into
Sylphimon. And just look at that. Once she's talking to Ken, she says every wrong thing you can think of. Who is this and what did you do to Jolie? It's episode 31 already. The time for establishing your characters is over. You fail. We find out that Kari envies Jolie's openness about her emotions. Kari wishes that she could be like that herself. However, her not showing any emotions have so far been treated as a virtue, as her problems never get in the way of anyone else. But now we see that she wishes that this wasn't the case, and she's just keeping quiet to make everyone else happy. That's not very virtuous. Does that correspond with her crest of light or contradict it?
She theorizes that her keeping these things inside her is the reason she gets stuck in the dark world.
She says she doesn't want to go there, but she can't avoid it. I guess that means that she gets depressed because she's repressing her true self, but I'm not sure. Okay, so in theory, these characters could actually learn something from each other here. Kari can learn to be more comfortable with speaking her mind, and I guess Jolie should learn when it's time to dial it back a bit. But such a symbiotic lesson is never learned. No, the thing that makes them achieve fusion is that Jolie tells Kari that she'll be a friend to her and help her if she becomes depressed. It's pretty basic stuff and not really a payoff to the weak conflict that has been set up. I wish Jolie and Kari were more developed as individual characters and as a pair. How about giving these two something to do together over a few episodes to build up to the fusion? Sort of like what they do with Cody and TK later. But, you know, better. Jolie is into technology, and we've been told that Kari likes photography.
Well, maybe you could do something interesting with that. Well, they didn't. In fact, Kari barely uses her camera at all.
She snaps a picture of Tyrannomon in one episode, and oh yeah, and she took a picture here too.
Oh, and I completely forgot about this one. But I think that's it. Anyways, back to Jolie and Kari. Having their contrasting personalities be the source of conflict isn't exactly a bad idea. However, in order for that to work, you first need to have clearly established characters. Jolie and Kari do not fit this description.
The way the show represents it, the fusion comes off as too forced. These characters have nothing in common and no chemistry. This fusion doesn't feel earned, and it's so emotionally weak. It doesn't resonate with me.
Anyways, now Sylphimon has to fight Blossomon. But wow, Sylphimon destroyed Blossomon in one hit.
I guess she wasn't much of a threat. Number 28. BlackWarGreymon doesn't know what he's doing or where he's going in life, and it's the perfect metaphor for this season. We now enter a new mini-arc. Arachnamon creates BlackWarGreymon out of 100 Dark Towers. Out of all the evil Digimon the writers could choose, why this one? I mean,
back then, there were already lots of evil mega monsters who hadn't appeared in the show yet.
And we've already had a virus metal Greymon. You'd think that's enough evil Greymons for one season. It's so weird that both of them are antagonists in the same season, yet there's no connection between them. And shouldn't Ken have like horrible Kaiser flashbacks when he sees this guy? Nope, there's none of that. All BlackWarGreymon wants to do is to find someone worthy of fighting him. he believes he will find this opponent by destroying the 8 Holy Stones, which keep the balance of the digital world in order. Arachnemon and her partner Mamimon have been searching for these Holy Stones, and Nefertimon has only heard rumors of them.
It seems like these are pretty hard to find then. Not something you just stumble upon when taking a stroll through the digital world.
So why is this Holy Stone just out here in the open like that? This looks like a pretty special monument out here in the middle of nowhere. Why hasn't anyone found it before? Shouldn't this be like the Statue of Liberty or the Eiffel Tower? In this episode, where Jolie goes to Kyoto, BlackWarGreymon destroys a Holy Stone, which causes him to phase into the real world in the same manner that Ogremon did in Season 1. In that one episode when Tai went home, did Ogremon destroy Holy Stones too? What actually did happen there? And more relevantly, what's happening now? I guess the destruction of a Holy Stone creates some sort of gate to the real world? The Holy Stones are meant to stabilize the barrier between worlds, after all. So why does something like this only happen when this stone is destroyed? Nothing like this happens with the other ones. And why is Yoli the only one who can see BlackWarGreymon? And now he's together with what appears to be his minions. Where did these guys come from? They weren't with him before. And how come they can seemingly materialize at will? Wait, last time we saw Ken, he was having a conversation with Izzy, home in Odaiba. Now he pops out from a digital gate here in Kyoto. How? Did he really go to the digital world only to find a portal back into the real one? Why not take a train or a bus? A man who later turns out to be Sora's father asks Yoli about Digimon. Since the show hasn't decided whether the public knows about Digimon or not, we don't know if this is a big deal.
Next up, we get a scene where Kari says that Gatomon has taught her about computer stuff. I'm confused as to why the writers didn't have Yoli teach Kari this, as Yoli is the computer expert of the group.
Having those two help each other would have been a good opportunity to reinforce that Yoli and Kari are now closer together after their fusion. I suspect that the writers stopped caring a long time ago and therefore didn't even think of this connection themselves.
Let's move on to TK and Cody. These two are now the only Season 2 pair who hasn't fused their Digimon yet.
Cody doesn't understand how TK can be both a nice, caring guy, while also wanting to destroy evil at all cost. This makes him not want Armadillomon to evolve together with Patamon. I like that Cody is philosophizing, because it shows character, but TK hating evil while being a good guy shouldn't be so hard to grasp. This is a pretty weak dilemma.
Okay, back to the things I don't like.
Cody lies to TK about having kendo practice so that they don't have to walk home together. A big deal was made about lying back in the Submarimon episode. Cody learned that lies are okay sometimes, but only those that help people.
However, this new lie didn't help TK.
Since Cody takes this kind of stuff pretty seriously, lying like this is very out of character for him. He could have just said, "No, I don't have practice, but I need some time alone." This conflict between Cody and TK is actually stretched out over a few episodes, which is a good start, but in the end, there's no real resolution, just like with Jolie and Kari. Cody coming to terms with the fact that TK wants to kill BlackWarGreymon isn't what triggers their fusion. I'm not even sure if Cody ever comes to terms with it. Sure, there's a scene where Matt explains to Cody why TK feels that way, but Cody and TK still don't see eye to eye on the matter. In a later episode, Cody is still reluctant about killing Marine Devimon, and TK never really had any problems with Cody at all. The only one holding up this fusion is Cody. Oh, look at this. This bothers me. It's Sylphimon time, but rather than Nefertimon and Aquilamon fusing, Nefertimon first has to degenerate into Gatomon. Why wouldn't Nefertimon be able to fuse here? She has the same data as Gatomon. It's still the same creature that would combine with Aquilamon. The result would be the same. So why not Nefertimon here? I assume it's just because they would have to animate a new sequence with Nefertimon instead of Gatomon. But maybe you don't need the sequence. Look how Omegamon did it in Digimon Adventure Tri. They just turn into energy and are done with it. The way Nefertimon devolves only to evolve again, it's just very clunky. I want to quickly say something positive here. Ken calls his mother and asks if he can eat dinner with friends. This makes his mother so happy that she starts crying, because Ken hasn't really had friends before. This moment is a really nice touch, and it tells us a lot about both Ken and his mom. It's great. More scenes like this, please. Number 29, Expositionmon. We've finally reached the Qinglongmon episode. Remember how I talked shit about this guy before?
Okay, so the Holy Stone arc culminates with BlackWarGreymon trying to destroy the final Holy Stone. Remember, he does this because he wants to have an epic battle with the Holy Beast Qinglongmon. However, before the final stone can be destroyed, Qinglongmon appears. He tells BlackWarGreymon to get a life.
What follows is a pathetic exposition dump where the writers try to patch over all of the past continuity errors. So the plot screeches to a halt in order for Qinglongmon to tell the audience what the heck is going on. This isn't the only time Season 2 does this. In both episode 27 and 33, Izzy sits down with the other characters and tells them that there is important information he hasn't told them before. A similar thing happens in episode 39 with Jenai, and every time it is totally separate from the main plot of those episodes.
This is a bad sign, folks. You want to weave your exposition into the plot in an organic way, and you want to avoid this.
So, before I go on here, I'm gonna backtrack a bit. At the end of Season 1, we learned that Tai and his group weren't the first people to save the digital world. Before them, a separate group of 5 kids had a similar adventure. Season 1 didn't do too much with that concept, but that's okay. Season 2 could pay off that setup, right? Well, nope. The first group is never mentioned in Season 2. That really annoys me. The Kaiser really fucked up the digital world over the first half of the series, and no one even thought to look them up. Nobody thought to write an email and say, "Hey, you guys saved the world before, you wanna give us a hand here?" So the reason I bring this up here is that the sequel series to Season 2, Digimon Adventure Tri, actually does do something with this original group. And we learn that Qinglongmon, yes, this very same Qinglongmon, is the partner of one of the original 5. Okay, cool, but where were you guys during all of Season 2? Ugh, this retcon is more the fault of Adventure Tri. But the fact remains that the original group was a loose end, and Season 2 didn't do anything to tie it up. In retrospect, it feels pretty weird that Qinglongmon is in charge of the exposition, yet he doesn't mention his own partner and the original group at all. I mean, if you have to do an exposition dump, why not have a little throwaway line about them here? Well, maybe this exposition is packed with so much juicy stuff that they couldn't fit any information about the original 5 into the runtime. Well, no, actually. Let's go over what Qinglongmon has to say. Basically, it's just a bunch of hasty excuses for why things don't make sense in Season 2. He tells us that the reason that he and the other holy beasts weren't in Season 1 was because the Dark Masters sealed them before the series began. Okay, that would have been nice to have seen. You could have set it up with a flashback in Yoli's Kyoto episode or something. Now it just comes off like the writers didn't think this through at all. Probably because the writers didn't think this through at all.
我々の封印を解くためには、さらに子供たちから紋章の力を借りなければならなかった。そのせいでデジモンが完全体になるためには、我々の助けが必要になってしまった。
それで特別な時にしか完全体になれなかったんだ。
Wait, TK, you were there. You should know this stuff already. Qinglongmon also tells us that armor evolution is indeed older than the Kaiser's reign. It's ancient.
そしてこの世界に暗黒の塔が立ち始め、その暗黒の力によってデジモンたちが進化できなくなった時、この世界の調和を望む意志は失われた古代の進化の力を使うことにした。
Seeing that the Digimentals are marked with the crests, does that mean that the crests are ancient too? But I thought the crests were created specifically for the Season 1 kids.
まず私たちは皆さんのデータからデジバイスと紋章を作りました。
So here's a thing to think about. Ken created the first D3 during his first trip to the Dark World. The other D3s, those belonging to Davies, Yoli and Cody, those were made with the sole purpose of competing with Ken's original. So, wait, armor evolution is ancient, but the D3s are only 2 years old? How could you armor evolve before the tool needed for armor evolution was invented? It's almost as if the writers didn't know what they were doing.
もう一つ、闇に飲み込まれたものを元に戻すために、闇の力に覆われていた優しさの紋章を一時的に奇跡のデジメンタルにすることも必要だった。
And what's this about the Digimental of Miracles being temporarily created to bring Ken back to the light? I thought it had been in Ken's possession for a while. It seemed to act as some sort of engine, powering his base, meaning that it would have been there from the moment he built the base. I don't understand this. Oh, and also, what do you mean by it was necessary to create the Digimental? Do you really have the power to do that? To just create a key to unlock a new evolution? That's really impressive, especially since Magnamon is roughly as strong as a Mega level. Why don't you ever do that again? Maybe the writers didn't think that one through either.
You know, part of being a good storyteller is to make sure that the audience has the appropriate information needed for every part of the story.
Episodes such as this one
just proves that the writers had no idea what they were doing.
We are given information in episode 27, 33, 37 and 39 that we would have needed all the way back in episode 1. Why don't the season 1 monsters evolve into their stronger forms? Why did Davis's clothes change?
Why are Patamon and Gatomon the only ones out of the season 1 monsters who can armor evolve?
Why doesn't anyone remember Digimon? Why weren't we given these answers before? These aren't some sort of mysteries that the audience would have to figure out along the way. It's all because the writers hadn't thought of it back then. And now they have to spend a whole episode backtracking.
And worse yet, this information isn't given to us in an organic way.
A god comes down from the sky and tells us what has been going on.
And worst of all, most of it doesn't even make sense.
So yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, this story isn't told very well. And unfortunately, it's not about to get any better. So, join me again in the fourth and final part of this review, where hopefully the writers have put in some thought.